Hello, and welcome to Conversations About a Way Forward from Count Me In to Win and the Talk on Main Street. Today's guest is Andres Useche, a California-based musician and activist, and Frank Walton, a Charlotte-based podcaster and activist, in a conversation about a way forward with Annabel Park.
Hi, Frank. Andres, how are you?
Hey, it's good to see you.
Good to see you guys.
Good to see you.
Oh my goodness, my mind is just swimming with so much news just even today. I can't even process it, so I'm hoping you guys can help me. I'm going to start with Andres and then go to Frank. Andres, what happened today that you've been thinking about?
Well, I'm very excited because after a long fight, protracted fight, finally the Supreme Court rejected Trump's efforts to stop DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. So, as we know, Trump is always advancing racist ideas, is what I would call it, xenophobic ideas, and he's pushing for major discrimination and make that policy. So, in the case of dreamers who have spent most of their lives here because they were brought as children by their parents, so they grew up here. Some of them don't even know Spanish. Some of them don't remember any other home country and feel themselves very much American. To them to be exposed to being deported, which is what Trump wants, would be a tragedy, right? So they've been fighting, and we allies have been trying to help for many years. First to pass the DREAM Act. Of course, the main goal, and I think the Democrats have been aligned with this goal for a long time, is comprehensive immigration reform, offering a path to citizenship, not just to them, but also their parents, who have been contributing as well to our society. But although the Gang of Eight and other Republicans before Obama got elected sort of gave us an idea that they would cooperate, if Obama met certain parameters, that they would, that at least we would have enough votes among them to pass it in the Congress, to pass the DREAM Act and give if not comprehensive immigration reform, at least the DREAM Act, benefiting these children of immigrants. Everything changed once Obama became president. They blocked every single one of his efforts in immigration. The majority of Democrats supported, and they wanted immigration reform. The White House initiative was asking for a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. And the Republicans had none of that. So in the end, Obama had to do what was his last ditch effort. It's not something he wanted to do because he knew it was frail. He wanted to have a legislative process through Congress so that it would be set in stone. But that didn't happen. So he had to take an executive action, basically, which was trying to get protection, at least for the dreamers, and it's something that has to be renewed every 2 years, and it's very difficult to get. But they had that, and since that happened, many of them have been able to lead their lives, to work. I know friends of mine who had children here, and now they were terrified because as soon as Trump came into office, he wanted to do away with that, and he had the executive power to do it. This is what Obama didn't want to happen. And because they've been stacking the Supreme Court, there was a big chance that we would suffer a big loss today, and it was an amazing win. Whatever happens, because the fight has to keep going, today's was a significant win that we have to celebrate, because it really is, it's something that could have changed the lives of so many instantly. And people I know personally, and that there are exemplary citizens, you could say, in the way they behave and the way, they've always paid taxes. They love this country. They've contributed. Some of them went to the in the military, essential workers, but educated teachers, everything. And they were targeted this way. So I'm very happy for them. I feel it's very well deserved, and we have to keep fighting so that they're not only, it's not a temporary answer, but also that we we get comprehensive immigration reform for their parents and their families and everybody else that has been contributing to this great country.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was very surprised. It was actually something that concerned me quite a bit, and I was kind of bracing for a loss, so I was a bit shocked. Frank, how about you? Oh, by the way, Andres, I sent you a message on chat. Frank,
Okay.
how about you? What's on your mind? Frank, you're on mute.
Mainly what's been on my mind this week is the continuing, it's not even doubling down at this point. It's like 100 down on Trump's base, continuing to stoke the division. So for instance, you're talking about DACA. He just tweeted that he's basically going to campaign on how the Supreme Court has let down conservatives and let down Republicans specifically. Here's a man who's supposed to be governing for the good of the country. Here's a man who obviously is a Republican, but is supposed to be concerned with all of our well-being. And to him, all of this is political. And so what we continue to see is the politicization of all of these different elements of government and oversight. Anytime someone does something that he does not agree with, he demonizes them. And so it's interesting because I feel like his biggest weakness is his inability to find common ground with anyone. He only can go in the direction with which he's already decided to go into, which is this base of the Christian conservatives and the really, really hardcore right wing of the party. And so he's willing to basically alienate any people of color, any people that believe in immigration reform, any people that don't like the tyranny that seeps into his policies. He doesn't care. He does not care. He's not going to govern in any way that benefits us as a whole. He's going to continue to antagonize, even if that means antagonizing the Supreme Court, which we all know isn't supposed to be political, but does have a conservative lean right now. But because John Roberts said that specifically the way that the administration worded this and went about it, they have to come back and try to retool their argument in a way that's not just as blatantly political and divisive, that actually has some legal substance to it. Donald Trump instead is like, no, you're the bad guy. Here we go again with his simplistic views. Now the Supreme Court is the bad guy, even though it's much more complicated than that. And part of the reason is he's so bad at politics that it's easy for the Supreme Court to say, the way you did this is wrong. Even if we were to agree, the way you did this is wrong. So therefore, we can say no. It's a frightening time, but everything that happens kind of always comes back to Trump and his insistence in doubling down, tripling down, quadrupling down on feeding the base and the incendiary rage of that base.
I mean, do you think it's possible he just really doesn't know what else to do? Like he's just a one-trick pony. Like he just doesn't know. He thinks this is really the only way to win.
I mean, absolutely. That doesn't make it any less dangerous. Was the, I like to say this to people that are questionable about their support of Donald Trump, that may or may not have voted for him because of their issues in 2016. This was an experiment. We knew this was going to be an experiment. I knew it was going to fail because you can't hire somebody to just for instance, in the restaurant industry, you can't hire somebody, no matter how smart they may be, to just run a restaurant successfully with no experience whatsoever. There's too many complications. There's too many intricacies. It takes experience to do something like that. It's not about your intelligence or your brain capacity. But for those who thought, okay, he's a successful businessman, which I quibble with all day. He was not a successful businessman, but let's leave that aside. Even if he were a super successful businessman, you can't just jump into this with no experience. But that's what he did. And what we're seeing is he's not equipped for this job. He doesn't have the temperament for it. He doesn't have the sensitivities for it. He doesn't have the knowledge base for it. I bet you he could not tell you the Bill of Rights. I bet you if you asked him what the 19th Amendment is, he couldn't tell you what that is. Couldn't tell you what the 12th Amendment is. Now, again, regular citizens might say, well, I can't either. Can you, Mr. Smart Guy? But this is the President of the United States of America. The fact that he has consistently shown that he is the one-trick pony that you mentioned, that's dangerous. He doesn't have any ability to adapt to the situation. Specifically, COVID-19 showed the dangers of a person that doesn't have the ability to shift when the country demands it. The same thing with these different uprisings, the protests, what he would deem the riots. Part of that was because he's the leader and he had no ability to comfort people, to speak to their rage, to speak to their anger, to speak to their, concerns and their sadness about another incident. Instead, he is, who we elected, and that's not good enough. We've seen it. Except for his base, it's not good enough for the greater American population. It's detrimental. The experiment has failed.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the thing is, okay, the three of us right here, we are good part of the Obama coalition, right? I'm Asian American. Andres is Latino from Colombia. You're African American and you're in North Carolina. If we're going to win, we have to get our people to go vote, right?
That's correct.
So I'm just wanted to ask you guys, like, how are we going to do that? How are we going to get our people to vote in this election? Because it's all going to come down to turnout, as we all know. So do you guys have good ideas for how we can do that? Andres, what do you think?
We have had sometimes a problem with engagement and with understanding and just the will to look at the big picture and how things work in Washington. Sorry, my dogs are going crazy. I think we're easily divided, and I cannot speak obviously for my community because it's a very varied one, and we have conservatives and we have progressives and people to the extreme left and the extreme right, like everything else. But I've noticed the ones on the left and I believe, like many groups, the ones that, outside of our ethnicities, but also many groups that ended up voting, for example, for the Green Party. And it's been proven that they were targeted by trolls, Russian trolls, in inflicting divisive ideas, so that it's always divide and conquer. It's very simple. They don't want you supporting a more moderate candidate that's going to move the ball forward. It might not be perfect to where you want to be, but it's going to be moving the ball forward to that common goal. And they obviously want to divide us, and it's worked sometimes with the left, sometimes with the right. But I think one case that we can effectively make is Trump is crazy. He's a bigot. He's ignorant, and he's stupid. And he's shown it time and time again. And sometimes we're too polite to say that and to put it into those words. But you can point out to any example. If somebody who's from the Republican Party or Latino who's very conservative, you could say, well, it's not just liberals who are attacking Trump. If you look at, for example, even Bolton, who's a villain into himself, but very conservative, and he has, a lot of credibility in that crowd. He was in his new book, he's saying that Trump thought that Finland was in Russia, and that he didn't know that England was a nuclear power. So, I mean, let's suppose that you're fine with discriminating against a whole group of people, right? And you're fine with Trump saying, as he did say to Xi, that he was fine to create those to capture and keep all those Muslims prisoners in China, and let's say that you're okay with him doing the most unchristian thing you could imagine, which is caging kids, or long before that, how he felt about the Central Park Five and wanting death penalty for people who were not guilty and not and it had a very faulty case. If you're okay with that bigotry, wouldn't you still look at him in terms of, well, is he at least a competent person who can really speak about the economy well, who can express himself in complete sentences? Is this someone who has the intelligence to lead, even if those are your ideals? Because right now, I mean, the way I perceive it from outside, it's like the perfect propaganda guy as to why the whole Republican Party should perish. And my belief is that many of them, if they had any guts, they would put some real opposition to him, or their party's going to go down. I mean, look who they're associating themselves with. And
Right.
the problem is they don't do that, and that's why we have to vote, and we have to make the case to our communities of how important Congress and the Senate are. And look at what Mitch McConnell is doing, how much they've kneeled before this guy who's shown nothing but incompetence and corruption. And people who claim to be the most patriotic have been fine with him, talking to and believing Putin over our own intelligence agencies.
Mhm.
So
Well,
there's a lot to say. I mean,
well, what do you think, Frank? I mean, why don't some people vote? Like some people, I mean, I met older people who would tell me they have never voted. I still, like when I go door knocking or do voter registration, I still run across these people. So I'm just, how do we get people to vote?
For one, I feel like, again, a lot of this stuff comes down to education. I feel like enough people don't understand. People say, I don't like politics, I hate politics, and don't realize that politics isn't everything. Politics is at work, politics is in schools, politics are in your sports, politics are in the church. So people need to understand that politics exists. Number two is the idea that not voting is somehow of some value. It's there's a valor in not voting because all sides are corrupt. But what that fails to ignore is or acknowledges that, well, people are still going to vote. The system still says people have to run and people are going to vote. And so you're just taking out your voice completely and allowing for other people who are definitely going to vote and definitely going to run to continue to stack the courts and to stack the legislation with people that don't believe in your ideals. Again, that goes back to the point of the education, because people don't know what the judges do. People don't know how laws are made. I've argued this point recently on Facebook a lot as to what Obama did do, or what laws did Obama put that were good for Black people. And so I end up using that as a teaching moment to tell them that, look, the president in most cases, he's an executive figure. He's overlooking the establishment, but he does not make legislation. That is handled by your lawmakers in Congress. And so therefore, voting for a president does not help if you don't vote for the apparatus of people who actually make the laws. So we have to communicate to people how this works, why your vote is important. Community engagement is the easiest way for me to talk to my fellow Black people and try and get them to vote. Say, look, okay, let's take Joe Biden and Donald Trump out of the equation for a second. Let's just talk about stop and frisk. Let's talk about stand your ground laws. Let's talk about how the police are trained and these budgets. Everybody's talking about defund the police now. That stuff is based in the voters' booth. How you vote in these local elections determines what your city council is going to do when it comes to these decisions. And so it's important to me to get people to understand why voting matters and how it matters on different levels, not just every 4 years voting for one president, but keeping an eye on who your legislator is, your legislative body is, looking at the tenor of the judicial system, looking in your own community. We just talked to Kane, who's running in North Carolina, and he was saying that they are doing redistricting in North Carolina based off of the census this year.
Yeah. Oh, just explain. Jason Kane is running for North Carolina State House. District 51. It's sort of southwest of Raleigh.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So in the local Raleigh community, he's running for the House, the North Carolina State House. But because it is post 2020, this is the election after 2020's census, all of the districting lines are going to be redrawn. Right now in North Carolina, both the House and the Senate are controlled by Republicans who have a long history of really just underhanded tactics when it comes to redistricting. But now this is even fairer. This is fair game. If they win again and they have the House and they have the Senate, they have every right to draw these lines however they see fit, especially based off of recent Supreme Court decisions. And so with this, the imperative is on the people. Again, our responsibility to make sure that we have people in positions of power that represent our ideals, and that comes through voting. That might not be fair. That might not be ideal. Yeah. But it is what it is. And it's important to communicate that to people, especially ones who don't understand that if you want water in Flint, Michigan, that comes down to people in Flint, Michigan voting for people that care about your water. If you don't vote and people get in power that don't care about you, what you are going to get is police brutality, broken schools, messed up streets. You need representation in order to get what you want.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah. I mean, okay, here's another way of thinking about it. The three of us have another thing in common. We've all tried to create content about politics to either break it down, to engage people. I've worked on documentaries, lots of short videos, constantly trying to find ways to engage people. Andres, you worked on music videos and done events. You've made films. I mean, we all try to like create content to engage people, but in reality, like I think people either are completely addicted to news and they're constantly like refreshing Twitter and Facebook to get news, but they don't really understand kind of the mechanics of politics. Like they don't understand how government actually works because it's very different from news. You know, so this is where there's a huge disconnect between people who constantly are entertained by the news and people who don't understand how government works. And I feel like it's our job to figure out how to engage people on kind of the mechanics of how things work so they don't end up saying, oh, it doesn't matter who's elected. I don't need to vote. Voting doesn't mean anything. You know, Andres, what do you think about that? I'm sure you've, wrestled with this question.
Both you and Frank are absolutely right, I think. And it's part of that disconnect between what we see and what we feel we can do. A lot of us in our communities feel disconnected and also shunned sometimes, and we surrender that power. And that's something that we have to be very clear about. When you don't elect someone, when you don't participate, you're surrendering that power that you already have, that you deserve. That's your right. You're surrendering that power, and somebody's going to use it, and they can use it against you. And don't think about policies as news, like Annabel says. Many people perceive those news passively, and there's so much stuff going on and washing over us. But those votes count, and those votes add up, and all of us march, and we love protesting for a just cause, and that's a good way to put pressure. But we need somebody to turn that into policy. We need somebody there, as Frank said very well also, to legislate. And we as communicators, what we're trying to do, I guess, is to say, this person with what he believes in and what he's running on is going to affect your life. It's going to affect somebody who and before inside our communities, it could be somebody that may be undocumented, that you might know might be deported because of this. Somebody's family may be separated at the border. How can you not react to that? And with something like COVID, what I think that made evident is that having someone like Trump or that sheriff in Arizona who didn't want to talk about safe distance and anything like that, he's affecting a lot of people. We need leaders who care about the well-being of people and who are informed by scientists and not just by their bigotry. So we have to try to communicate that one way or the other.
I mean, but let's break it down. Let's figure out how we do it. Frank, I've been encouraging both of you guys to do podcasts.
The thing, people vote for selfish reasons. That's the reality of the matter. And people do things in their self-interest for a lot of things. That's important, is to recognize the importance of self-interest in all things, and specifically in voting. I think part of it is we tried to make voting seem like the greater good way too often, and then kind of be a little judgmental to people who vote for selfish reasons. But that's the reality of the matter. Some people vote based on their tax breaks, so that's why they vote Republican. Some people vote based off of the church they go to, abortion, one note issues. So I think what we have to do a better job of is figuring out what issues really affect people, and then kind of shape narratives in ways that make people say, oh, wow, it is important for me to vote. Wow, I never thought about that. You're seeing now, this moment, more people are paying attention than ever before. Because of COVID-19, that affected small business people, that affected parents with kids and how they're teaching and what their kids are being taught, insurance and things of that nature, healthcare. So you're starting to see people be more engaged because these issues are now knocking directly at their door. COVID specifically is a game changer. This police brutality situation that happened was a game changer because a lot of people spoke up about it. One of the things that I feel was the most important this time was that Black men who are very respected, coaches and teachers and businessmen, talked to their friends and were like, yeah, police pulled me over for no reason. I've been searched for no reason. I am scared. I'm a 48-year-old doctor, a friend of mine was, and he got pulled over 5 times since the start of the year. That type of stuff affects people because it's now not just these gangsters you see on TV, it's their friends. I think the relationships that we have and our ability to communicate the importance of these relationships and these issues to people while speaking broader, speaking in a way that connects individually at the same time is kind of the key to this. Speaking in a way that you can get a mass audience using these different tools, using podcasts and video chats and the things we're doing now, but conveying a message that when people hear it, it hits them individually right here and makes them say, hey, yeah, I don't want to stand my ground ruling my city. I don't want that to happen. I don't want governors that don't believe in science. I don't want that to happen. So while it's difficult, I think that kind of comes down to it is making people feel like things should matter to them. I know saying it in a way that it matters to them personally.
I mean, I think we all know what the content needs to be, but I guess I'm asking, like, how do we deliver the content? Because we have to compete with mainstream media. We have to compete with Twitter. Well, we can use Twitter and social media, but there's just so much asking for people's attention. But I feel like it's really important for us to just go ahead and try using everything we have, our social networks, just like our network of friends or we just have to just be out there trying to do this instead of thinking that we have like the ideal platform that allows us to compete with like Fox News or Rachel Maddow. No, I mean, we just have to use whatever influence we have to get our voice out there and engage people about how it actually works. You know, I don't know. I don't really know any other way of doing it other than just like trying to create that content. I mean, I wish we had shows. Like there are incredible shows based in hospitals or police stations. Think of all the crime shows that we see. Like, what if we had shows about how government works? Like, I never see TV shows based on, but that's satire. It's not
But
really.
again,
The West Wing.
but
Yeah,
that goes
West Wing. Yeah, but it's a rare thing. Yeah.
but that goes back to representation. You know, I actually, since quarantine started, I've been coming up with all kinds of ideas for content. TV, movies, stuff like that, writing scripts and little elevator pitches and things like that. But that's part of the issue is the control of this messaging, the representation of this. One of the things that Black Lives Matter is really saying right now at this moment is that our stories matter. This isn't just about police brutality. This is about representation across the board. We're, you know, sports, we're always on the field, but you don't see us in the coaching ranks. You definitely don't see us in the ownership ranks. Where's the representation there? Hollywood, we get certain people every once in a while, the Spike Lees and Tyler Perry's, but for the most part, all of these stories are still filtered through the Hollywood system that is represented by the same system that represents Capitol Hill, Wall Street, Silicon Valley. Right now, there's so much of America that is just not represented because we continually have these power structures of these old white guys determining which stories get to be told, which stories don't get to be told, who gets to be a coach, who doesn't get to be coach, what TV show gets green light, what TV show does not get greenlit. And so one of the things we're saying is we need representation. So as a group, collectively, we have to acknowledge that and use the different structures in place to try and either upset that system or negotiate to get our way there. But then also guerrilla tactics work. You don't necessarily have, you don't have to have $1 million to create the next big thing. You know, small things create big works. And so the effort and the creativity and the innovation can just take you down that road just by applying it, just by working on it.
I think, okay, I want to brainstorm a little bit.
Can I, before we move away from some of what Frank was saying, I wanted to answer.
Sure. Go for it.
I was thinking when he was talking about how selfish we are sometimes, all of us, when we vote and people vote for their own interests. I think that we have to communicate, but be better at communicating that it's in our self-interest to have a functioning economy. It's in our self-interest to have a functioning society. It's in our self-interest not to have pedestals to people, to Confederate flags and people who believed in slavery, because that's going to rip up the fabric of our country. That's always going to harm us. And I don't think anybody really wants to live in that world if they think about it, right? Some people may want to, or are fine living with this faraway dream that they can be one of the billionaires of the 0.1% or whatever who can rule the world, and that everybody should get their trickle down, and be happy with that. But most people, I think, should realize that a strong economy requires buying power from the general public. So we need a healthy economy, even for the ones with the big factories. They need buyers. They need, something that is not equal, that doesn't offer better opportunities for everybody. And ladders of opportunity is bound to crumble. It's going to lead us to a depression. It's going to increase the deficit. It's what's happening right now. So I think we can make that connection between what is good for the other is good for ourselves. I think that basic premise is true, and we have to make that case. When we talk about media, I think part of the reason that I myself have delved into music and filmmaking to tell some of these ideas is because, you know what, sometimes we talk and people hear us, but a lot of the times when we talk, people let that stuff wash over, and they really don't care. They may not pay as much attention if we bring a lot of information, but sometimes you can bring a melody, or you can bring a powerful image, like you both have done, Annabel and Narek, together. You did some of that very powerfully, you know, and those images move people. So I think the arts are capable of showing us the commonality between all humans and how we feel. If we see a family in pain, I think that's incredibly powerful. For example, so showing, and sometimes images are worth, you know, 1,000 words. They really are. And sometimes, and music and images together, in my experience, that has moved people and has engaged them so that they can at least open up a little bit, so that they can do more research or come closer to us for more information, more pamphlets, and become active in other ways. But yeah, I think I love the idea that at least a silver lining in the COVID era is that we're seeing people who usually use these huge studios, very well lit, to present these very slick shows, are now doing it from their houses, just like we would. So I think it sort of democratizes things, and we could, in fact, of course, they have a team of 20 writers working on brilliant material that's going to be very funny and engaging, and, you know, a graphics department still, and music and all of that. But I think if we made a product that was somewhat comparable in quality, I would watch it, you know. And why wouldn't others?
Yeah. Frank, did you want to say something?
Oh, I agree. The brother speaks excellent points consistently. Andreas, appreciate that. Because that's like, art is very powerful. Art is very powerful. Music is powerful. Images are powerful. Diversifying this is another important part. So, you know, yeah, let's segue that into the brainstorming, but diversification of these messages is key as well. Using music, using art, using conversation formats like this. Comedy, that's what Dave Chappelle does so well. You know, because he's a famous comedian, he was able to get all these eyeballs. And even though it wasn't funny, his charisma and his ability to tell a story and to engage an audience was very valuable in getting that across. And so I do feel like the media, and especially now, that's a big point too, that at this point, people don't trust the media. They have about as bad an approval rating as the politicians do. That's one thing the left and the right can agree on, is that the media itself is lacking right now. We need new voices, because when you watch a lot of mainstream media, you hear the same thing over and over and over. It's almost like they get together, read the same notes, and distribute them across the different platforms. And they have the exact same things that they're talking about on every program. And it's like, of all the things that happen today, why is every channel picking the same exact 5 things to argue over, when they could do this 5, they could do this 5, they could do this 5? That's why people don't really rock with the media, is because it just feels packaged and produced. I sometimes think that in the attempt to be super polished, that we lose credibility with our audience sometimes and lose interest, because it's like you're trying to be something you're not, or it doesn't feel authentic. I think authenticity is important to people right now. They want people that feel like they're talking to a friend, or listening to a friend in the neighborhood, or listening to the hip hop album that they like. They want stuff that feels like they feel. They don't want, you know, Chris Cuomo up there with his suit, even though I like Cuomo. But some people don't, you know, they don't take him serious. He's just another talking head on TV that, you know, blah, 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 blah. I'm a former lawyer. My brother's the governor. My dad was the governor. So people are like, he portrays and pretends that he's like this a round the way guy, but how can you be? You know, when you have $1 million contract and you're sitting behind this shiny desk and you're talking these things, people don't take that serious. So I feel like some of this guerrilla tactics, we've seen it with YouTube. These people on YouTube get 11 million followers opening up baseball cards. How does that happen? I mean, you know, you have people that get paid to play video games on YouTube. They literally get paid to play video games on YouTube and have huge audiences. So I think that there's opportunity with all of the technology we have. Yes, there's a lot of content, but if you make it and you engage and you can market it, and that's the key, is the marketing.
You might do well, like combining your bartending skills with talking about politics, you know, because people love talking to bartenders. And
Maddow tried that, remember, in the beginning?
yeah.
I've tried it. It's interesting. I actually had a concept called chopping it up, and it was like a cooking and bartending situation where you're talking while you're making these different things, and then at the bottom of the screen you're showing what you're doing, and then at the end everybody just sits around and then you just enjoy your libations and enjoy your food and kind of talk and go back and forth. That's one of the ideas I came up with. Again, it, you know, it's worth trying. It really is. It's not as easy because bartending is like one thing and politics is another thing. And ironically, they say as a bartender, you shouldn't discuss politics. But in this format, yeah, you know.
I think something you said.
You're on mute now.
Oh, okay. So I was gonna say, like, I can see maybe you doing like TikTok videos where you talk about a particular subject of interest, you know, like the civic topics that you're interested in, and use that to educate people, because it could go viral. You could get, like, you know, lots of people following you where you talk about these issues. But I think it has to be constant. You know, you have to do it like all the time, right? Like Sarah Cooper, the comedian who did that lip sync to Trump, she had one viral video and she just kept doing more and more and more. I think it just has to be like ongoing engagement.
And
Trump gives her lots of material.
Yeah, she got something that she can do quickly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but some of what Frank says as an opportunity, and I feel I'm usually the most optimistic person in the conversation in politics usually, but in this sense, a lot of what Frank is saying that encourages him, you know, that there are people who, you know, thousands and thousands of people watch others play video games, and somebody gets, you know, super popular and famous because of they fell a certain way or something funny they said, and that becomes viral. I feel there's so much of that it's going to be hard to, you know, push ahead of a lot of content. There's so much competition, and a lot of it, you know, and it's because people are looking for different things in different ways, and sometimes they just want that quick fun fix. It's a different animal, and at least myself, I don't know, you always have to find that point of balance, because you don't want to be chasing something that's really not you, in the hopes of becoming popular in order to tell that message, but not really really thinking about the kind of audience that would actually listen to you. How do they consume information? What are they receptive to? And I think Annabel was right, for example, talking about the podcasts, you know, and podcasts they have a different audience, and that might be a way to do it. In my case, I'm very visual and musical, so I would try to find something that works on several levels.
You could be a YouTube channel, you know, because a lot of political discussions take place on YouTube, actually, less so on Facebook. On Facebook, it's like the echo chamber, but on YouTube, I think there's just more cross-pollination going on. I don't. That's my impression, because my niece and nephew are active on YouTube, but they were not get on Facebook at all. So there are a lot of young people looking for content and guidance on YouTube. So I think we should think about being on YouTube.
I do think YouTube is a great tool.
Yeah.
And it's so it offers many different possibilities, because you can do something really cool guerrilla style, the way Frank is talking about, without much technology at all, but you can also do something a little bit more polished if you want to. It just offers, it's a big platform.
I want to try going live on YouTube next time. Because right now we're live on Facebook, but I can go live onto YouTube as well. But in any case, so, okay, back to this discussion, how do we get our community to vote? One thing I am trying to work on is like trying to get campaigns to do in-language outreach to immigrants, like, because especially with the Asian American voters, language is a barrier to participation. And so I know, and I'm sure this is true with, people with the Spanish language voters as well. If campaigns did a better job of reaching voters in their own language, you would show in turnout. I absolutely know that from having more.
That's a huge thing. Yeah.
So that's one thing that I think we can do. The other thing is, I think that, when we have opportunities to speak up, whether it's to our friends, on Facebook or social media, it doesn't matter. I think, we really have to kind of present voting as not just like a duty. This is like your duty. It's really about power. This is about us having more power. And I think I want people to associate voting with power, not duty, because duty just seems like, oh, you got to do like paying your taxes or something, and it's not. Yeah.
I think we talked before. I was telling you about how cool I thought it was that we were dressed up in well, my friends actually from Indivisible were wearing superhero suits in Comic-Con, where I had a panel, and we did a lot of voter registration there, and there are all the signs. Voting is your superpower, and that was really
that's
cool
a great
idea,
slogan.
It truly is. Yeah,
and I think that would draw younger people. Like, for a lot of them, they just haven't thought of it that way. They thought of voting as like getting a driver's license or paying your taxes, and not something you enjoy doing. But I think we can make voting more social, more enjoyable, like associate voting with celebrating, with joy, with things that are really positive.
That's the thing that protests have. I think protests in a way are very attractive, very sexy, because you go out there, or before COVID, well, even now, you go out there and you feel the energy of the people, you sing, there's the power of music again, chanting, you hear, and you feel part of a movement. And if you can just make that connection from there, from those protests, from just protesting to voting, you can change the world. You literally can. Everybody that's coming out, if everybody takes the same attitude about voting, bigots out, it'll be a different country.
But I think we can organize things like, a party, like after party for voting. So for people who vote, they can come to this party, or and then there'd be like food and music and like a chance to like really celebrate the fact that we participated. I don't know. I just think we have to make voting attractive and fun and enjoyable as an experience,
And I think you're starting to see that more. I think part of it, back to the idea of protests being quote unquote sexy or whatnot. One of the cool things from 2016 is the combination of the protests and Black Lives Matter and the Bernie Sanders campaign is that it has encouraged people to be active, not just voting, but actually running. And so it's easier for people to get involved and vote when it's people that they feel represented what they are about. It's harder for people to get excited about these same old politicians that we've continually seen in the past, these older guys. I just watched video of Robert Byrd giving a speech on the Congress floor when he was like 86 years old or something like that. The man looks crazy. He's up there shaking and he's talking crazy. And like when you see the Senate and you see it's all of these super old white guys, like people are like, this is ridiculous. I don't want any part of this. So that representation is also important, where it feels representative of something that you want to be a part of. People don't want to be a part of this male, old, white patriarchy, good old boy network. And so they're like, it's more, like I said, it's more valor to not vote and to fight the system by not getting involved, because they're the lesser of two evils point. Whereas now, because you're starting to see more AOCs and Ilhan Omars and KD Porters and younger people and people different colors and, LGBTQ community and the Hispanic community involved, it's easier now. That's helping us out a lot in getting people excited about voting for these young, fresh, bold, smart, wonderful candidates. So that's part of it as well.
I think also the sad truth is that too often we don't support our own.
Fact.
Because those people need help launching their candidacies, and sometimes we wait until they're anointed by some higher power before we pay attention. I've noticed this in my community, which is not all the same, but I've noticed it in my country. That's kind of sometimes we criticize the powers that be, that are monochromatic, very white often, but at the same time, our minds are so colonized that we have to wait to see how they react to our own candidates and the people from our community before we take action and we offer that support. So we really have to be there. And you're absolutely right. It's also about running and voting, those two powers, but they go hand in hand.
Yeah. So, Cian, thanks for joining us. We're actually about to wrap up, but I want to give you a chance to join us. I want to see if we could go around and say one thing that is giving us hope right now. So starting with, can everybody mute themselves? I want to start first. So you guys can mute yourselves. Okay, so the thing that's giving me hope is I see this wrestling with revisionism, with Confederate monuments and all that. I mean, as you know, I spent a lot of time documenting this for starting 2012, seeing the connection between historical revisionism and white supremacy and this kind of fascism that we're seeing. It's not even conservatism, but it's like authoritarianism and fascism. Just connecting those dots, and people are going about it so with so much energy and aggression and focus. Just that right there is giving me so much hope. Okay. Because I would get frustrated in the past trying to get people to talk about and think about it, but now it's just like, everybody is all about trying to remove symbols of Confederacy because they see how it impacts how people view Frank, me, Andres, Cian, how people see us right now has to do with those stupid statues. And so that's giving me a lot of hope. And I don't think we can really overestimate how important this is, because those statues are coming down like dominoes right now, and it's just like incredible to see. Frank, why don't you go next?
What's giving me hope is what we alluded to earlier, is I think people are starting to realize the idea of power dynamics. That's a complicated thing that's elusive to grasp, but we're starting to see people realize where their power lies, how their power lies, and that's a first step. This protesting this time was interesting because it's getting things done. These police in Atlanta, this last shooting, that doesn't happen without these uprisings. You're starting, like you said, the Confederate statues coming down. That's a result of the power of these people in these protests. You're starting to see people step down. The police are getting antagonized, but they should be held accountable. People are now seeing that we need to hold these people accountable. So we're starting to slowly get the train moving towards the actual representation of power of the people. That's why the first Bill of Rights, Amendment number 1, is about freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of peaceful assembly, because that document is representing our powers, our rights. And in 2020, by God, it looks like we are acknowledging that we have these powers and we can use them to put the people in power right now in uncomfortable positions and shift these paradigms of power temporarily and hopefully long term. So I'm hopeful about that.
Great. How about you, Andres?
You know, when you look at the U.S. from outside, you have a very idealistic perception of it, through music, through movies. And so when I first came into the U.S., I was hit very hard by the reality of the discrimination that I found that was still there, that I thought was a thing of the past. I was misinformed. I thought in the 60s, everything had been sort of resolved. And we actually believed in justice for all, right? Liberty, justice for all, true equality, which is something so basic. It's like basic right. But that idea is so beautiful and so powerful that it's what drives so many of us to come here. For example, myself, speaking for myself and so many. And when we found that reality, people from different colors, we banded together, thanks to leaders like Annabel, and all of us working with this hope, we made something impossible happen, something that happened that even white friends of mine, liberal friends, thought it was impossible to elect an African-American candidate to the presidency. That a lot of people just didn't think that was even possible yet. And I saw the diversity, and I knew that just having Obama as a president would influence generations of kids looking up and seeing a president of color. That would be more powerful, and that could somehow counteract a lot of the terrible history that we've had so far. And through all these years fighting for comprehensive immigration reform, we got some wins, Arpaio, then we got Arpaio out, and then, SEER failed, and one thing and another. You learn it's a long, the arc, you have to bend it, and it's going to be long. It's a marathon. You have to keep at it. You get the energy from the youth who join us, and sometimes they feel the same way if something doesn't happen exactly as they wanted. Some lose and get out of the system, and some of us say, come on, we felt the same way and we kept going, and you can make progress. And that's what we're doing. We're making progress little by little. And I'm very, very inspired right now by the progress that I'm seeing on the streets. And it's the same thing. It's people from all walks of life, saying Black Lives Matter, because it's just the most basic human right. And only when we acknowledge that can all lives matter, because we can't leave anybody behind. And I think a lot of people are waking up to this very basic fact. And I think that that's going to really turn the page. It's not going to be the end of the book. It's not a happy ending, a Hollywood ending when it's over. It's something that we have to keep protecting and fighting for every single day. But progress is happening, and we're making it happen, and we're going to keep making it happen. That makes me hopeful.
Thank you. Cian, what's making you hopeful, or what gives you hope?
Seeing so much unity that I've never seen before. Is everything just coming alive. Last weekend, I went to the George Floyd Memorial in Minneapolis, and seeing so many different people there, all joined for one purpose. It was amazing, and it truly gave me hope.
Wow. I would love to hear more about that sometime. Well,
I can send you pictures if you'd like me to.
Yeah, please do. I would appreciate that. Okay, well, thanks you guys for joining me tonight. I'm glad we had a chance to kind of process all that's going on. We didn't even talk about John Bolton. We'll talk about it another time. Lot to talk about there. But okay, well, let's do it again soon, all of you guys. And
I'll be on time next time.
Okay. I've sent you a reminder. But
happy Juneteenth. Juneteenth
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Happy
Juneteenth.
Juneteenth. Yay.
Appreciate you,
All-
brother. Thank
All
you.
right. Love
Bye,
you guys.
everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
You've been listening to Conversations About a Way Forward from Count Me In to Win and the Talk on Main Street. To learn more, find us on Facebook at Talk on Main Street.